Okay, good morning, Boker Tov. Welcome back to Parsha Perspectives for today. As always, we begin with gratitude, with appreciation for our generous sponsors. Thank you to Becky and Avi Katz and family who've sponsored this series in memory of David Grossman, Lila Nishmas, Becky's father, David Ben Menachem Manish. This morning's shiur is also sponsored by Dr. Golda Sadowski in memory of her dear uncle, our beloved member, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Kurtzer, very special man, humble, modest, a great teacher of Torah and example of Torah. And their dear aunt, Yibadul Chaim Tovim, Doris Kurtzer. Also sponsored this morning by Ilona Schwartz in commemoration of her mother's Yurtzei, Chana Paro Bas Yehuda Tzvi. And I also want to dedicate our learning to my dear friend who's undergoing surgery right now, Yosef Ben Rachel, a very special man. The surgery should be successful. He should have a complete and a speedy and a painless refuah shlema. Please God. And as always, our learning, all the hostages should come home, all our soldiers should be safe. Klal Yisrael should have safety and security in Israel and around the world. Page 318, Parshas Va'eira, the stories we know so well, not only because we read them at the beginning of Sefer Shemos, but because we then relive them, reenact them, we then tell them at the Pesach Seder each and every year. Perek Vav Pasuk Beis, the very opening of the Parsha, Vayidaber Elokim al Moshe, God spoke to Moshe, Vayomer Elav Ani Hashem, and he told him, I am God. Va'eira al Avraham al Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'kel Shakai. And I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Ushmi Hashem lo nadati lehem. And while I appeared to them, I didn't reveal myself to them to the same degree or the way that I've revealed myself to you. V'gam hakimosi es prisi itam laseis lam eretz Canaan. I made a covenant, I made a deal with them to give them the land of Canaan. Eis eretz megureihem asher garu ba. The land in which they traveled, in which they journeyed, in which they sojourned. And I've also heard, I've heard the krechts and the groans and the cries. And I remember that promise that I gave to your forefathers, to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now, to really appreciate the beginning of our Parsha, you have to see it as a continuation and in the context of the end of last week's Parsha. The end of last week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu, the most humble of all men, Moshe Rabbeinu, who hesitated and demurred when Hashem recruited him to be the leader, the spokesperson of the Jewish people. Now he finds his voice. And now he protests to none other than the Almighty himself. And he says, what's going on over here? You're making things worse. From the moment I've come to Paro, things have just gotten worse. Why would you send me? Lama hareyosa lama zeh shlachtani. Why are you making things so bad? Why are you making them worse? Why did you send me? So God says, whoa. 1 second. Let's reset. Let's reboot. Let's start this conversation again. Vaydaber Elokim. And now it is, Elokim is the notion, the name for God that is Din. Din. Vaydaber Dibur to Vayomer. This opening pasuk, we've discussed it before. We won't get into it right now. But we go from Vaydaber to Vayomer. Two different languages. Lashon Raka, Lashon Kasha. Soft and gentle and sweet versus firm and strong. Elokim versus Hashem, the name of God that reflects justice, Din, versus the name of God that is Rachmim, that is compassion. What's going on over here? Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, Vayomer Elav, God reintroduces himself to Moshe. And he says, Ani Hashem, I am Yud Kei Vav Kei, I am the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, HaYehovah V'yi, I was, I am, and I will be. Chazal point out, writes Rabbi Soloveitchik, that Hashem was very critical of Moshe's argument with him, and that a similar criticism was leveled against Shlomo HaMelech. So Medrash Shemos Rabbah. The Medrash explains the Torah enjoined Israelite kings from having too many wives, so they would not sway the king from wholeheartedly serving God. Later in Sefer Dvarim, we'll see the instruction that Jewish kings are not allowed to have too much property, too many cars, horses, too many things, too many wives. We have a focus. There's a mission. Don't be distracted. Don't be derailed from what you're meant to do. Shlomo HaMelech, however, maintained this rationale did not apply to him. His belief in God was ironclad, could never be weakened, no matter how many women he wed. Chazal indicated the moment Shlomo decided to violate this command of the Torah, the letter Yud from the word Yarbeh in the phrase V'lo Yarbeh lo nashim, should not take too many wives. The letter Yud, says the Medrash, complained to God that Shlomo ignored this mitzvah. In the Hebrew language, the Yud is the letter prefix for a verb to indicate future tense. The Yud argued that while initially Shlomo's heart would indeed be unaffected, Shlomo did not recognize that in the future the situation could change. When he became older and weaker and his mental abilities were no longer as sharp, we learn that his wives indeed swayed Shlomo's heart, and that altars to false gods were built in his palace by these wives. The Yud demonstrated that even Shlomo, the wisest who ever lived, could fall prey to what he was certain he could avoid. This same Yud criticized Moshe, because in the course of his argument with Hashem, Moshe made a mistake that involved the same letter. When Hashem sent Moshe to Paro for the first time, he did not reveal himself with Yud Kei Vav Kei, representing all three tenses, Haya, Hova, V'yeh, was, is, and will be, past, present, and future. God told Moshe only of the past, the God of Avram, the God of Yitzchak, the God of Yaakov, and the future. What name did he tell Moshe? Well, Moshe says the people are going to want to know, who sent me? What's your name? What's your brand? What's your logo? How do you want to be known? What's your name? What name did God invoke? What name did God say? Eke, I will be the one I will be. By omitting the part of his name which represents the present, Hashem in effect said that while Jews were still being persecuted, the present cannot be understood. The burning bush, Hashem had already warned Moshe that Paro would not let the people go immediately, and that there would be much tribulation until the redemption. Moshe should accustom himself to relating to Hashem only via the Yud, the promise of the future redemption, and the Hey representing the past. Despite being warned, Moshe did not accept this idea. When Paro rejected Moshe's message, the Torah says Moshe returned to complain to God using the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Torah used this name here because Moshe was not satisfied with the name Eke. He wanted immediate redemption, arguing, Lama hareyosa lama zeh. Why are you harming the people? Why have you sent me? Since I've come to Paro to speak in your name, all he's done is make things worse. Both Moshe and Shlomo emphasized the present over the future. Hashem, through his attribute of justice, would have killed Moshe for his apparent impudence. However, since Moshe was merely reflecting the anxiety of the Jewish people, the divine attribute of mercy had pity on Moshe, and Hashem forgave him. He would now reveal himself in the present through open miracles, with the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. While Hashem told Moshe he would begin the redemption immediately, he at the same time contrasted Moshe's behavior unfavorably with the forefathers. God reproved Moshe, telling him that the Avos had not demanded such instant gratification. They remained satisfied with a promise that would be fulfilled only in future generations. This is such an important insight and commentary of Rav Soloveitchik, because as the name of our shiur suggests, Parsha Perspectives for today, we read the Parsha every year, and there's never a coincidence, nothing is random. The Parsha is in Yana Diyoma. The Parsha is the prism through which we're meant to interpret and live and experience whatever we're going through, individually and collectively, separately as people, and also as a people, as a nation. Rav Soloveitchik here says, what's going on in this conversation between the end of last week's Parsha and the beginning of ours is Hashem responding to Moshe saying, 1 second, don't only live in the present. The present you won't understand, and the present will be hard, and you shouldn't want to change it. That's why you have a mission. That's why I'm sending you in. Don't be satisfied. Don't be complacent. Don't be indifferent. You won't be able to accept the present, the suffering, the servitude, the oppression, the persecution. But have faith, there will be a future. There is a redemption. And your forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they didn't ask this question. They didn't demand redemption right now. They understood it's a process, that it unfolds, that it takes time, that it happens incrementally, that there are 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And they're willing to wait and to wish and to want and to long, because they know that that day will come. Moshe, you're not satisfied with my name. You want Yud Kei Vav Kei, Haya Hova. You want it right now in the Hova, in the present. You need to live up to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Shmi Hashem lo nodati lahem. I didn't tell them that I could be found in the present. I only told them about the future, and that was good enough for them, and it needs to be good enough for you. To live in the present with an eye towards that future. To not evaluate and to not decide your relationship with Hashem only by what's happening right now, but to be able to step back and see it in a context, to see it in perspective, to see it in the course of history and destiny, to understand there isn't an only here and now, but there is a future. And Chaver, that is in many ways the theme of our Parsha, the Daled Lashonos of Geulah, the 4 languages of redemption that we're about to see, the 4 cups of wine that we drink at the Seder. They represent, as we say every year, that Geulah redemption is not linear, it's not binary. There's not Galus and then Geulah. We're not in exile and then we're redeemed. It's not linear. We don't see that point in time where we go from the harshness and the darkness and the suffering of exile to the bliss and the glory and the joy of redemption. It's incremental. It takes time. It unfolds. There's 4 Lashonos. There are 4 units or periods of time. There are 4 chapters. Geulah happens. There's an aschalta de Geulah, which is the language not of modern Zionists. It's the language of Chazal. It's the language of the Gemara Megillah. It's the language that was employed by Poskim, Nechamanami, Aschalta de Geulah. There is the beginning of redemption. We gave a shiur on it last year where we showed Geulah Yisrael across the entire spectrum invoke that language of Aschalta, of Rashis. There is the beginning. There's the flowering. There are the signs. There is the initial light of redemption. But just because the light begins to shine doesn't mean overnight we go to the complete and to the full redemption. Complete and full redemption. We're in such a painful time for Klal Yisrael with such mixed emotions as we welcomed 3 young women home this week, and please God, we'll welcome 4 more next. The price that we pay, the risks that are taken, the cost and the Chil Hashem in the world. The Chil Hashem in the world that could exist. As Alan Dershowitz, I thought, wrote so well. This was not a deal. This was an extortion. Somebody kidnaps someone from your family and you have to pay a ransom. You don't say we negotiated a deal. It's not business. You say you were extorted. We were extorted. A crime was committed against humanity and then was celebrated in the streets of Gaza by some Zaftig terrorists who claim they were malnourished, but look anything but. And children dressed as terrorists celebrating. That is nothing short of a Chil Hashem. So where's the Geulah and a Chil Hashem? Where is Hashem while Hashem's name is being desecrated? And you contrast that with last night, immediate executive orders defunding UNRWA and removing any blockage of arms to Israel. So which is it? Galus or Geulah? The answer is yes. It's both. And that's the way our history has always been. It's the way our destiny will unfold. Moshe was impatient, and Hashem was ready for his imprudence to punish him. But he displayed a rachamim. And we have to follow Avram Tzchak and Yaakov at the beginning of our Parsha to recognize that sometimes when it's hard to see or feel in the present, we still have to have faith for that future, for that redemption that will yet come, particularly when we consider our past. And as horrific as the decisions that have to be made in Israel right now, and the price that's being paid and the risks that are being taken and what is unfolding, for 2,000 years we would have given anything to be in this position. As bad as it is, as harsh it is, for 2,000 years we would have given anything to be in this position. So this insight of Rav Soloveitchik of what's happening in this conversation last week to this week, Vaydaber to Vayomer, Elokim to Hashem. Why are we talking about Avram Tzchak and Yaakov? What's the medrash connecting to Shlomo HaMelech? Is that reminder of the critical importance to live in the present, but to have that faith and that eye towards that future, to know that he's always been there and he will be yet again. And he will be yet again. Rav Rashi here. Rashi tells us on the second pasuk, in Pasuk Gimel, Va'eira, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Zog Rashi. In case you're not sure who they are, Va'eira al Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, says Rashi. Where's Rashi? That's where he always is. Pasuk Gimel, Ela Avos. 2 words. In case you were confused, in case you forgot, in case you don't remember. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they're a band called the Avos. They were the Avos. They're the patriarchs. Everyone asks on this Rashi. The Mefarshim are all bothered by a very obvious question. What did Rashi add? Do we not know that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are the Avos? Do we not know that they are in fact our patriarchs? Rashi normally comes to expand, comes to explain, comes to elucidate. What did he add? What did he add here? So Rav Shaul Alta, the Ger Rosh Yeshiva Shlita, he says the following. Each of the Avos were an unimaginable madrega. Each of the Avos, what they achieved in their life, what they represented, and what they implanted into us, into our very DNA. Chazal say, in fact, in Parshas Rabbah, that the Avos hein hamerkava. The Avos were the chariot. They were the conduit. They were the mouthpiece that we were able to learn and make contact and have access to the divine. We're very far removed from such madrigos. So a Yid might think, says Rav Shaul Alter, a Jew might think, I have no connection to the Avos. They are great figures of history. I open my Chumash and I learn about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, our founding fathers, and Lahavdil Elef Alfei Avdalos. as little a relationship I have with Washington and Adams and Jefferson. They're great people. They lived in the past. Maybe I'm reading their biographies. Maybe I know something about them. Maybe I don't. I have no connection. I have no relation. They're not my family. They're great men of the past. They're great people of the past. So maybe Khalil al-Avdil, one would say, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they appear in a book. I should read their biography called the Torah. They're great people of the past. I don't have a connection. The answer is the Avos. They're your tatas. They're your zaydas. They're your fathers. They're our fathers. Every one of us descend from them. Every one of us have a deep relationship with them in the past. There's a great story. A Jew, once went to see the Chozeh of Lublin. He said, I need money. There's a whole story. I'm not going to draw it out dramatically because this isn't a drasha, it's the Parsha shiur. But I'll just tell you succinctly and reserve the right to give the dramatic version of it another time. Deal? It's a deal. Okay. So this Jew went, he lined up with everyone else to see the Heilig of the Holy Chozeh of Lublin. He needed money. He was a pauper. He couldn't pay his bills. And he finally saw the Chozeh. And the Rebbe gave him just a little sum of money, a few coins. So the man said to the Chozeh, I'm a relative of yours. We're family. We're mishpacha. I should get more. So Chozeh of Lublin looked at him and he said, you're a distant cousin. Don't play that game with me. Your family, you're a distant cousin. So he waited more time until it was time for mincha. They gave a clap, told the Rebbe it's time for mincha. Everybody got together and they began to daven mincha. And during davening, he heard the Rebbe read from the siddur, and he heard the Rebbe who was saying the Shemona Esrei, the Shtila Shemona Esrei, the quiet Shemona Esrei, but he was saying it a little bit out loud. And the Rebbe got up to the words, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. And this Mechutza leaned in and whispered in the Rebbe's ear, they're just distant relatives. They're distant. So when the Rebbe finished the Shemona Esrei, he gave the pauper some more money. He understood. For Jews, there's no such thing as a distant relative. You want to invoke Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, then you got to help your 15th cousin 17 times removed. Because there's no such thing as a distant relative. Says the Ger Rosh Hashiva. This is what Rashi says. I appeared Va'eira, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. In case you forgot the Avos, you didn't forget. When we refer to the Avos by name, we have little connection to the levels they represent. But they're not just great men of the past. We're not just reading their biography. They're our Avos. When we look at them, we have a connection with them. We have a connection to them. We get inspiration from them. They're not just people of the past. They're our mishpacha. They're our relatives in the present. We're flesh and blood. These are our avos. It's not only as chus. It's not only we can invoke them. It's not only that they give us privileges, but it means that they're also in our DNA. They also implanted within us incredible kochos, incredible possibilities, incredible strength. That is the insight of Rav Shaul Alter, why Rashi says Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are the Avos, number one. Number two, Rav Chatzko Weinfeld, who was here last week, 2 weeks ago. Great Talmid Chacham Yerushalayim. So says Rav Chatzko Weinfeld, he has the same question, and he says the following. He quotes from the Sifsei Chachamim. Why did Rashi El HaAvos as opposed to Avram, Yaakov? Because he writes B'lashon Katzar. Rashi writes in a very succinct way. But Rav Weinfeld wants to suggest the following. Rashi is explaining to the Avos, revealing himself as Kel Shakai and not with open miracles. Kel Shakai is the name for God, for being in the mundane, in the everyday, in the hiddenness. That Hashem is not revealed in open miracles that you see before your very eyes. Not the 10 plagues and not the splitting of the sea, but the fact that you woke up this morning and you have your faculties. The fact that the little day, everyday miracles that are all around us. That's the name. So the Avos, they didn't need to only find Hashem through open miracles. Through the everyday and the mundane and the simple, they also found Hashem. They found Hashem without himself needing to reveal with open miracles. Not because they're just Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as individuals compared to other individuals, but it's as Rashi is saying, because they were Avos, pioneers, trailblazers, they set a precedent, they implanted within us, they found Hashem through nature. They saw the supernatural in the natural. They saw the extraordinary in the ordinary. But Moshe B'nai Yisrael, the children of the Avos, we need revealed miracles. So this is the Akdama to what Hashem is now going to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's what Hashem is saying. Hashem is saying, I'm about to give you open miracles because that's what you need. But know that your Avos, because they were Avos, they saw me, they found me, even in the hiddenness, they didn't need it to be revealed. And he goes on, he elaborates, he has more. But I want to suggest to you my own. I want to give you my own suggestion of maybe what it means, Ella Avos. Ella Avos. But first, one more. Number 3, Rav Shmuel Berenbaum. Tiferet Shmuel, Rav Shmuel Berenbaum, Rosh Yeshiva Lemir, Brooklyn. When Hashem recruits Moshe to lead council, the wartime consigliere, he sends Moshe to confront Paro. Moshe hesitates. Mi anochi? Who am I? Lama zeh shalachtani? Why are you sending me? He doesn't say, Lama shalachta, why are you sending? Lama shalachtani, why me? Because what's Moshe's argument? Moshe feels inadequate. Moshe feels incapable. He feels ill-equipped, ill-prepared. Moshe says, I lack the courage and the eloquence and the confidence. I can't make the case. I'm not going to get the people out. And to this, Hashem turns to him and he says, do you know whom you descend from? Do you know where you come from? Your grandparents, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were great men. But you know what their great accomplishment was? Because they were designated as Avos of Klal Yisrael, they merited Siyata D'Shmaya Ad Ma'od. Because they were designated to be the Avos, it's not they were the Avos, so they had Siyata D'Shmaya. Because they accepted the mission, they were prepared to take it on. That's why it's not because they were great they became the Avos. Because they were designated to become the Avos, they became great. They became great. So now that you've been appointed to lead, to fight, to free the people, you're going to merit that Siyata D'Shmaya. So it says of Shmuel Berenbaum, that's why Rashi says El HaAvos. Hashem appeared to them not just because they were great, but because they were destined to be the Avos. That's why Hashem made them great. If he's going to send us on a mission, he's not going to leave ill-equipped. He's not going to send us compromised. If he sends us on a mission, he's going to provide us and give us what we need in order to fulfill it. But I want to suggest a fourth and final, maybe understanding of this Rashi. Elav mitzvah Yaakov, Ela Avos. Why do Rashi need to say that? We saw so far Rav Shaul Alter, we saw Rav Chatzko Weinfeld, Rav Berenbaum, and now one more. Why did Rashi feel a need to comment Ela Avos? We already know who they are. Moshe is being pushed to go before Paro, to challenge him, to confront him, to speak truth to power, to not back down. It is so easy to be intimidated or daunted or frightened, to not feel up to the task. How many of us have those moments? How many of us have those moments? Somebody says something anti-Semitic. Somebody's trying to deny our right or ability to live as a practicing Jew. You see someone wearing a pin or a sign, a symbol of a people who hate. Are you going to stay silent? Are you going to confront? Are you going to speak up? Are you going to advocate? Are we going to live up to that moment? Or are we going to be intimidated and daunted and frightened? Hashem turns to Moshe and he says, in that moment where you feel you don't have the courage, you think you don't have what it takes, I want to remind you, do you know where you come from? Do you know what's in your DNA? Do you begin to understand the power you possess by virtue of the justness of your cause, the truth of your story, your rights, the path already paved from those who came before you? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov aren't three righteous individuals. They're not biographies. They're not strangers. They gave birth to a people. They left a legacy. They transformed the world. El HaAvos, the Yezedas, the Imos, the Yerbabis. They're our mishpacha. They're our yichus. They're in our DNA. They're who we are. And therefore, they gave us that power. So don't back down. Don't take off your display. Don't take off your demonstrating. Don't ever stop practicing and being a proud Jew. Confront the people, the moment. Stand up with pride and with courage. Because Al Avram and Yaakov, El HaAvos, it's in our DNA. It's in our DNA. When the Lubavitch Rebbe would meet an unaffiliated Jew, they would often volunteer about themselves. They'd say, I have no background. I don't have any background. I don't have a Jewish background. And the Rebbe Zatzal would always correct them. He'd say, you don't have a background? Do you know who you come from? Every Jew descends from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, from Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. You have the greatest background a person could have. And they bequeath to you all you could ask for, to live and navigate this world. So don't ever say you don't have a background. You may not have an education, and now it's time to get one. But every Jew has a background. Because El Avram, El Yitzchak, El Yaakov, El HaAvos. El HaAvos. They give us whatever it takes and whatever we need to live in that way. El ha'avos. I can't help myself, so I'll just read to you in closing. We'll move on to the next pasuk. In June 1982, you know it, but it's always good to hear it again. Menachem Begin spoke before a session of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Begin was 39 years old at the time. Not Begin. At the time, Joe Biden was 39 years old. Thank you. And he lectured the 68-year-old Begin over Israeli settlements. Israel was at war in Lebanon, and the then senator warned that eroding support for Israel threatened U.S. aid. And Menachem Begin said, some say this is apocryphal, did it happen exactly, did he say it in these words, but the message is critical either way. He said, quote, "Don't threaten us with cutting off aid to give up our principles. I'm not a Jew with trembling knees." Begin said, "I'm a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it, we fought for it, we died for it. We will stand by our principles, we will defend them, and when necessary, we will die for them again, with or without your aid." Begin was a Jew who understood, he understood this Rashi, El Ha'avos. He understood this Rashi, El I don't think we ever had an applause in Parsha class before. Okay, something new. El Ha'avos, El Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. But it's easy to tell that story, apocryphal or true. It's harder to live it. There'll be a moment. We're seeing increasingly. In the supermarket or at the airport, there'll be a moment. Someone will say something or do something or try to deny you or deprive you, and it'll be your moment to speak up, to say something. You'll be at the mall, you'll be in a store. Will you use your voice? Will you find your power? El Ha'avos, El Avram, El Yitzchak, El Yaakov, because they put it inside, they implanted it in us. Perek Vav Pasuk, hey. Hashem says, "Ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael." I heard the cries of the Jewish people. Asher Mitzrayim ma'avidim osam v'ezkor es brisi. That Mitzrayim is, what does the word ma'avidim mean? Enslaving them, making them work. V'ezkor, and I will remember, I recall es brisi, my promise. Says Rav Druk in his Lavos Eish. Says Rav Druk, Yesh la'amor al diktok lashon hakasav she'omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe. V'gam ani shamati, and I heard. Which word is extra in this pasuk? V'gam ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael. Which word? Come on, people. Ani, I. The word shamati, I heard. So shamati already includes I heard. So v'gam shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael. Pasuk easily could have said, more correctly, accurately should have said, and I heard the cries of the Jewish people. What is the word ani? Adding. Od yesh ledaktik. Says Rav Druk. What does it mean? V'gam ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael. Halo yachal yalomar v'gam ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael me'avodasam. Why does he say that Mitzrayim ma'avidim? He should have said, I heard their cries from their backbreaking labor, from their suffering. Why add that it's Mitzrayim ma'avidim osam? He'or Tosefes Shabbos. Ma she'echas lama she'nemer pasuk lachman gam ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael l'chein amor l'bnei Yisrael ani Hashem. And Hashem says, I heard, I remember my commitment, my covenant, my promise, and therefore, what's the next pasuk? Pasuk Vav, l'chein amor l'bnei Yisrael, and therefore tell them, ani Hashem. I heard, tell them, I am Hashem. What's going on over here? 3 questions on these 2 psukim. What's going on? Says Rav Druk. Bi'ura inyan yira. K'amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Rabbeinu v'gam ani shemati. Ani shomea sa'akasim v'nakasim shel bnei Yisrael. V'ani shomea mehem ki heim svurim shemitzrayim mehem elu shemavidim osam. Einam mevinim shakol mimeni v'akol b'shlichusai. They think, what's the source of their pain and their suffering? Who's doing this to them? They're understanding, they're interpreting it only in the here and now, in this world, and they think it's Mitzrayim. They're looking and they think it's the United Nations, it's Hamas, it's Hezbollah, it's the Houthis. They're looking and they think it's only those wicked members, a handful of Congress. They're the ones causing this pain, this discomfort, this suffering. Go and tell them, Ani Hashem. Everything happening, everything unfolding, yes, they're evil. And yes, they should be accountable. But nothing could happen to you if it weren't the will of God. How do you reconcile free will and divine Intervention. How do we reconcile that age-old question? It's a difficult and complicated one for another time, one we talk about in our Living with Emunah shiur. But for now, Rav Druk says, the mistake of the Jewish people in Egypt was not seeing the hand of Hashem. They weren't interpreting all they were going through in a religious context. They saw it only as a geopolitical story unfolding. They listened to the pundits. Egypt was an empire. They were enslaving. What were the odds they can go free? Comes along Hashem and he says, no. Ani shemati. I'm hearing, and go tell them, Ani Hashem. Ani omed me'achori kol hatzar v'hasevel shalem. Ha'olam eina hefker. The world is not random. The world is not chance. The world is not filled with coincidences, and nothing geopolitical happens unless I will it and unless I want it. Mitzrayim eina mishtabdim b'hem Yisrael b'derech tivis. Mitzrayim are not subjugating and oppressing through some natural order, shuma acha sholetas aluma acheres, in which one nation conquers another. Ela hakolu b'ashkacha. Everything is divinely ordained. Everything is divine providence. V'ani echnasti osam lazeh. I put them in this place because I'm going to take them out. It's all part of a process. Something great is unfolding. V'tzivesi es kol avodas ha'parach hazu. Memela ma'achar v'ani Hashem, ani hu shenechnasti osam. I'm the one who put them in, and I'm the one who's going to take them out. And therefore, ani shamati, I have heard. Because it's not about what some political pundit says. It's not about some new election results. It all comes down to ani Hashem. Leiv malachim biyad Hashem. One can be excited and grateful. The prospect of a new dawn, of an inauguration of what will be. One could be afraid. One could be excited. I'm not weighing in. But all need to know that behind it is Hashem. And yes, we lobby and we advocate and we vote and we take our initiative and we do what we need to within a political process, but we never lose sight of who is the King of Kings. We never lose sight of who's behind it all. We never lose sight of the providence that prescribes whatever will unfold, whatever did unfold, whatever is unfolding, and whatever will unfold. Ani shamati. Hashem says, I'm the one who hears your tefillah and will make a change. And go tell them, Ani Hashem. Don't put all your trust and don't put all your confidence in any one person. Don't glorify and don't deify and don't see him as something more than he is, a hand and a puppet of Hashem. Be grateful, be appreciative and be grateful and lobby and advocate and build close relationships. We believe in that all, but never forget Ani Shamati and Ani Hashem. And Ani Hashem. They go together. He has a long essay. He explains it much more here. This was David HaMelech. When David HaMelech, Shimi ben Gera, hears, Shimi ben Gera curses David HaMelech, and Avishai ben Tzruya, his general, hears and wants permission off with his head. And David HaMelech says, relax. You think I could have been cursed if Hashem didn't want me to be cursed? He's not the one who cursed. Hashem decided I need to hear a curse. I needed to be cursed. And therefore, let me focus on why Hashem meant for me to hear that message. And don't worry about the messenger, Don't worry. The Shlach Kadosh says, Shlach Kadosh writes, quotes from the Arizal. We left. You should be taking furious notes, like a girl in seminary, because for the Haggadah, for Pesach, forget Parshas Va'eira. This is golden stuff for Seder night. So the Arizal, the Shlach Kadosh, quotes from the Arizal. Why did we need to leave B'chipazon? Why did we have to go out so hastily, so speedily? Why did we leave in such an accelerated, expedited fashion? Said the Shlach quoting the Arizal, because we were on the 49th level of Tumah. We were almost lost cause. And if we went down one more notch, one more rung, we would have descended one more layer, one more level, we would have been a lost cause. It would have been over. And that's what the Shlach says, what was that one last rung? If we would have lost our faith in Hashem, if we would have failed to see He's behind it all, we would have been a lost cause. We would have been helpless, and we would have been hopeless. What got us out of Mitzrayim is even as we were suffering and we blamed Paro, we blamed the Mitzrim, we still held on to, we knew behind it all was Hashem. And that's the merit of the Nashim Tzidkanios, whose chus negalu Yisrael Mitzrayim. What was that merit of the holy righteous women who took us out? Because they helped us focus on the fact that Hashem was behind it all. That Hashem was behind it all. So as this is the dawn of a new era, of a new term, we have to remember, as grateful or hopeful we may be, as frightened or anxious as others are, It's always Hashem is behind it all. Ani shamati, and tell them Ani Hashem. And yes, we operate and take initiative within this world, but we also have to understand and interpret within a religious context. As believing religious Jews, we don't just see the geopolitical, but we see something much bigger. We see a process of Geulah. We see Gvura. We see the Gvura, the heroism of the members of the IDF. We see in Israel that have come together. Yes, we've been punched. Yes, we've been knocked back, but we've taken more than a recovery and stepping forward. And what Hashem has done in the last year and a half, He's shown His mighty hand in ways that are nothing short of miraculous. Miraculous. I read an article yesterday, somebody wrote up just a year ago what was being described, what might have happened if the northern front opened up into a war. Israel couldn't handle fighting Hamas and Hezbollah simultaneously, and Hezbollah has 150,000, 200,000 rockets and capability and sophistication and tunnels, and we'll never be able to. And therefore, the diplomacy that's necessary because we can't. And fast forward a year later, Hezbollah who? Hezbollah what? Which rockets? Ever hear of the pagers? Miracles that have happened in our time. We have to understand and see. Ani shamati. Hashem heard our tfilos. And Ani Hashem, it's Hashem whose hand is unfolding and not fail to interpret. Pasuk Vav. We see these languages, these lashonos of Geulah that are happening now. Lachein amor levnei Yisrael. Go tell them, I'm taking them out. V'itzalti, I'm rescuing them. V'galti, I'm redeeming them. V'lakachti, and I'm going to take them to the mountain. And then there's a fifth lashon we spoke about last year, 2 years ago, which is the Hevesi. The Hevesi. Menachem Mendel Kasher wanted us to have a fifth cup at the Seder because we've merited to live through the fifth cup, the fifth language. That He took us out and He saved us and He brought us to the mountain and He took us into the land of Israel. And He was outvoted, and we don't, because we see and we're living even in Israel geographically, a Geulah, we're still in Galus. We're still in a period of Galus. But this first language, Sivlos Mitzrayim. Sfas Emes brings from the Chidushei Arim that the first language of Geulah is that Bnei Yisrael can no longer take it. I'm going to rescue, I'm going to save you from where? Mitachas, from being under Sivlos Mitzrayim. The word Sivlos means suffering. Suffering, backbreaking labor. We're being beaten, we're being tortured. And I'm going to save you from that torture. I'm going to rescue and liberate you from that, from having to be sovel, from that suffering. But the word Lizbol means something else. I'll give you a hint. Savlanut. What is savlanut? Patience. Says the Sfas Emes quote in the Chidushei Arim, and many say this as well. You know what, Hashem? The first step of redemption is mitachas sivlos mitzrayim. Stop living patiently in an exile that you should never accept. Never accept. Think Mark today? He said in one of his famous talks that we can never become adjusted, we have to remain maladjusted. One should remain maladjusted to racism and inequality among men. There are things we should never adjust to. They should never become normal. We have to remain maladjusted. Writes Rav Avram Shor Shlita, who's coming, please God, before Purim. Kizeu tokef hagalus, kasher ein margishim klal shenimtzaim b'soch hagalus. You know what the worst part of exile is? The darkest part of exile is when you don't even know you're in exile. The dangerous and darkest part of exile is when you've adjusted to the exile that you no longer even feel that you're in exile. Sfas Emes writes, Hashvelim she'ena margishim klal hagalus, Ela tzrichem Yeshua gedola v'ureishis ha'geula v'hotzeisim mitachas sivlos mitzrayim. It's almost as if the prerequisite, the precursor to redemption is to know you need to be redeemed. But if you've given up, you don't even know you need to be redeemed. You don't even know there's anything wrong. You don't even know there's anything wrong. You know, we live, Boca Raton, in 160, 170,000 Jews, 90% of whom are unaffiliated entirely. And I was speaking to a group of outreach professionals, passionate people in Kiruv. And I posed the question, I said, it's one thing when someone comes to us, they're thirsty, they're hungry for Dvar Hashem, there's something missing, there's a hole in their heart, they're lacking, they're unhappy, and they want the truth of Torah. And we say, come, have some kugel, have some cholent, have a Shabbos meal, come study Torah. But how do we wake up people who don't even know they're asleep? How do you feed people who don't even know they're hungry? How do you hydrate people who don't even know they're dehydrated? What do you do to people worshiping at the altar of the country club who've built a life they think of prosperity and happiness, which in so many ways is really empty and void? How do you tell them? You see the Sfas Emes coming true before our very eyes. The worst, the most dangerous part of Galus is to not even know you're in Galus. It's to not even know you're in Galus. So the first step of redemption is Votzeisi mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim. He quotes his father. Rav Avram Shor quotes his father, Rav Gedalia Shor, the Or Gedayahu, who would quote from the Beis Yankov of Ishbitz. Ikar Galus hayashayim nidme be'inei yeshivas Mitzrayim l'makom me'unag b'tafnukei malachim ka'eretz kegan Hashem hay Mitzrayim kol kach tshukos v'chemdos at shenach libam. Mitzrayim, Egypt, maybe the Jews didn't have access to it, but they admired it, they saw it, they followed it. Ooh, did you see the cars? Did you see the homes, the mansions? Do you see the delicacies? Do you see the new tequila that came out? Do you see how old the scotch, the aged wine? So they sat in Mitzrayim, and even though they couldn't indulge, but they were taken by the comfort and the prosperity, the convenience, and the lifestyle. Gemara, the Chazal say, "Ein eved yachol levrach Mitzrayim she'enoch liyosham eved midiyosar be'eretz acheres." A slave couldn't flee Egypt. It was more comfortable to be a slave in Egypt than it was to be royalty in another land. V'yolam necha mizeh shayu avadim, mibeis avadim, hey shayu mukvam v'lo yigishu klam en hara, v'zeu hagalus hachi kasher, kasher ein magish misurei hagalus v'chosh mizeu tov, v'lachein aschalos hagulu lahargish hagalus, v'lo lizbol hagalus v'latzos latzos misham. We have to remind ourselves, no matter how comfortable we may be, no matter what religious freedoms we may have, sometimes we have to remind ourselves, this is not the way it's meant to be. This is not the ideal. This is not the way it's supposed to. We're in Galus. We have to remain maladjusted. We have to remain maladjusted. Never adjust to this reality. This is not who and what. This is not the way it's supposed to be. And we have to constantly remind ourselves of that. Perek Vav Pasuk Yud Beis. Turn the page. Hashem says, Bo daber al Paro melech Mitzrayim. Come, we're going to go speak to the king. Yishalach b'nei Yisrael. He's going to send us out. V'yidaber Moshe l'fnei Hashem le'mor. Moshe spoke. Hein b'nei Yisrael lo shemo elai. V'ech yishma'ini Paro v'anir al sfasayim. What was he supposed to say, by the way? You'll note, and some have said, my mother pointed this out already on October 8th. Some have been pointing it out more recently, blaming why we had to allow ourselves to be extorted. Moshe did not go to Paro. The message from Hashem was not, I'm here, bring them home. That was not his message. Moshe didn't hold up a placard. He didn't chant, bring them home. What was his message? Let them go. Let them out. The onus, the pressure was not on himself, bring them home. The onus, the pressure, the call was, let them go. Send them out. Send them out. And the same here. We've made a mistake from day one. Because the Jewish people were being held hostage in Mitzrayim, just like our hostages are being held today. And the message to those who are holding a Jew hostage is not bring them home. The message to those holding a Jew hostage is let them go. Shalach es b'nei Yisrael. Send them out. Let them go. Let them go. When the message all a year and a half is bring them home, you're putting more pressure on your own government to make concessions and to let yourself be extorted than you are putting pressure on the evil, cruel holder of the hostage that they have to be crushed in order to let them go. Moshe says, but the Jewish people aren't going to listen to me. The Jewish people aren't listening to me. How will Paro listen to me? This is, Rashi quotes, one of the Kal V'chomers in the Torah. One of the Kal V'chomers in the Torah. The 10 Kal V'chomers we have in the Torah. Sorry, it's in Lavos Eish. Kal V'chomer, Rashi quotes the Echad Me'asara Kal V'chomer Shebetorah. What's the Kal V'chomer? A fortiori. Latin for, if this, then that. If the Jewish people aren't listening to me, why would Paro listen to me? Kal V'chomer. Everybody asks the same question on this Kal V'chomer. What's the question? Why did the Jewish people not listen? We just read why, the top of the page, Pasuk Tes. Lo shamua Moshe mikotze ruach u'me'avodah kasha. Rashi says they were out of breath. They were out of breath. If you've ever been out of breath, back-breaking labor, you can't even catch your own breath. you can't hear someone talking to you. Someone says, what should we do for Pesach this year? Who should we have for the city? You say, I can't breathe. I can't talk right now. I can't think about Pesach. I can't even breathe. So the Jewish people were like, I can't picture. I can't get out. I can't picture being redeemed. I can't picture living Pesach because I can't even breathe. Or Chaim HaKadosh says, Kotzer Ruach didn't mean shortness of breath literally. It meant having no vision. When a person is oppressed, when a person is down and out, they can't even picture things being better. It's all comment on mental health. We've spoken about it before. A person in a dark and a bad place can be imprisoned within their own soul. Can't even have the vision. Kotzer Ruach. There's no Ruach. There's no vision. There's no picture. There's no goal. There's no dream. There's not even that ability. So Moshe says they couldn't hear. They don't believe. Now you're going to send me to Paro? They, the beneficiary. They, the subject of the redemption. They don't believe me. Why would Paro hear? What's the pircha? What's the kasha? What's the question on this Kal V'chomer? It's an obvious one. Why didn't the Jewish people hear? Backbreaking labor. But Paro's sitting in his recliner in the palace watching football. He's comfortable. He's sipping a pina colada. Why won't he be able to hear the same message? The reason the Jewish people couldn't hear is very different, doesn't exist with Paro. So how can you draw a Kal V'chomer? The people can't hear. Why would Paro hear? Why would Paro hear? As I frek the oilam, that's the question everybody asks, including Rav Druk and his Lavos Eish. Sfas Emes explains the Kal V'chomer, and he says the following. Tainas Moshe Rabbeinu said, Ki avshe b'nei Yisrael yishrim b'kotzer ruach, ilu Paro b'hashket v'sha'anan ve'ena macharid. Paro is in comfort, tranquility, relaxation. V'komakom tzorach levin shel kol koach ha'emunah ba'olam tzorach liyos mavura yidei Yisrael tchila. Kol dargas ha'ruchanis ba'olam magios miYisrael. Lo yitachen sh'tei darga ruchnas amita she'en mekor ba'am Yisrael. If we want the world to live with faith, if we want the world to see a higher calling and a higher power, it has to start with the Jewish people. And if the Jewish people don't believe it and don't buy it, the Jewish people aren't proclaiming it and publicizing it, the Jewish people aren't displaying it, then no one else will either. So you're right. The reason for why the Jewish people doesn't exist with Paro when it comes to Paro, but nevertheless, if the Jewish people of Klal Yisrael don't believe it, why would anyone else believe it? That's how to understand the pasuk. Says Rav Druk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Rashi says Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hashem Shu Elokeinu Ata V'lo Elokei Ha'umos Hu Asa Lios Hashem Echad. The God who's our God right now, who the rest of the world doesn't believe. Even the Bible sales in America are up 22%. More Americans don't believe in God than ever. Right now, He's our God. We believe in Him. We're talking to Him. We're davening to Him. We're learning about Him. But the more that we do, Hashem Echad, He will be one day the God of everyone. Says Rav Druk, when and how, the more He's Hashem Elokeinu, the more we embrace, the more we display, the more we talk about, the more we live, the more we promote, the more we publicize, the more we practice, then He'll be Hashem Echad. The world will believe. The world will buy in. The world will come aboard. That's what Yosef HaTzadik did. Did Yosef HaTzadik Shem Shemayim Shagor B'fiv? The more Yosef spoke about, practiced, and talked about, again, we don't have time now, it's the remarkable conversation Yosef has with Paro. Paro takes him out of jail, says, I heard you're good at interpreting dreams. Biladai, it's not me. Hashem Elokeinu. He starts talking to Paro. Paro's a pagan idolater. By the end of the conversation, Paro's talking about Emir Hashem, Chaste Hashem, Be'ezrus Hashem. Paro says to his advisors, to his cabinet, have you ever seen somebody, Ruach Elokimba, who has the Spirit of God? Paro's talking all about God. How? How did Yosef do it? He showed him the Bible codes? Showed him all the proof and evidence of God's existence? No, he just talked about God. We have to not be embarrassed or ashamed to make a bracha at work. Even in a business meeting, excuse me for a millisecond, just want to thank God for this delicious meal we're about to have. We have to not be afraid to invoke God, not in an indoctrinating way, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a personal way. Because Hashem Elokeinu knew the more we live with Emunah, the more the world will too. What we put a focus on, the Brisker Rav Elva Soloveitchik said, why do more non-observant, non-affiliated Jews connect to Yom Kippur than any other holiday of the year on the Jewish calendar? He said, you know why? Because observant Jews put such a priority and focus and take so seriously Yom Kippur. So there's a correlation, there's a formula. The more we care about, the more we observe, the more we practice, then the more the world, the rest of the Jewish world and the world at large, sees and believes and practices also. That's number one. Then Rav Druk gives a second interpretation. This kasha on the Kal V'chomer. If the Jewish people didn't believe, why would Paro believe? So he says, what was the pircha, the question on the Kal V'chomer? Jewish people didn't believe. Why? Avodah kasha kotza ruach. Backbreak. Paro, he's sitting in the recliner. He's getting a massage. He's in the palace. He's toasting tequila. He's smoking a Cuban. He's enjoying watching football. So why won't he hear? He's not. Says Rav Druk, no, you're misreading. You think Paro has it easier than the people? When you're oppressing and you have to keep that going, when you are presenting yourself as a deity, as a god, and you have to relieve yourself at the river because you don't want anyone to know you're human, when you have to keep up that charade and keep up that image, you are suffering and you are being tormented more than even the people you're torturing. What an insight. What an insight by Rav Druk. The reason it's not a pircha on the Kal V'chomer is because Paro is not tranquil and serene. Paro doesn't have it easy while they suffer. The suffering is very different. The people are being tormented physically while they live with faith, and they're showing kindness to one another. And Paro has all the luxury and all the indulgences in the world. Physically, he's comfortable, but mentally and emotionally, he's tormented. Tormented. Having to keep up an image, having to live with that arrogance, having to present as a deity, having to have all the answers, being so unjust, being a dictator and oppressor. He is, in fact, more tormented than the people he's tormenting, and therefore the Kal V'chomer is accurate and the Kal V'chomer fits. Perek Vav Pasuk Chav Vav. Turn the page again. They go down to Egypt. They fulfill this mission. Moshe and Aaron are on their way. Who Aaron and Moshe? Asher Amar Hashem Lahav Hotzias Bnei Yisrael. And the Torah here testifies, in case you were confused, in case you lost track, who Moshe? This is the same Moshe and Aaron who are on their way. What do you mean the same Moshe and Aaron? Why does the Torah say who Moshe Aaron? Rashi says Yesh Mekom Shemaktim Aaron the Moshe. Sometimes the Torah puts Aaron before Moshe. Yesh Mekom Shemaktim Moshe Aaron. Sometimes the Torah puts Moshe before Aaron. Lo Malacha, to tell you that Shkulun Ke'echad, equal. They're equal. In the past, we learned a beautiful insight by Rav Moshe on this Rashi. We're not going to repeat it. But what do you mean they're equal? They're not equal. One of the 13 principles of our faith, according to the Rambam, is that Moshe is the greatest human that ever lived. Categorically different, the Av Nevi'im. They're not shkulin ke'echad. They're not equal. How could you say they're equal? So one idea is, to be equal with another is not to in fact be equal, but is to equally fulfill your mission. If everyone who's who they're meant to be, then they're equal. So this one is wealthy, and this one's poor. This one's brilliant, and this one struggles, is less intelligent. This one's artistic, this one's athletic, this one is clumsy, non-coordinated. To be equal is not to have the same talents and blessings and resources. To be equal is to make the most of what you have, to be true to who you are and who you're meant to be. That's what makes you equal. Moshe and Aaron were each honest with who they were and who they were meant to be. They each pursued and fulfilled their mission, and therefore shkulin ke'echad. Shkulin ke'echad. Because what we're given, the possibility and the potential we have is all from Hashem. What we make of it is up to us. And when we make the most of what we have and what we're given, then we are in fact equal. But the Chassam Sofer gives a different answer. Chassam Sofer says, you know what makes them shkulin ke'echad? I love this Chassam Sofer because I love this insight. We give a whole shiur on this, about the notion tefargin. This word doesn't exist in any other language. You can't translate the word tefargin. It's in Yiddish, and in modern Hebrew, it's not lefargin. In modern Hebrew, lefargin is tefargin in Yiddish. What does it mean tefargin? To be happy for someone else, to take joy for somebody else. Where do you see in the Torah? Because the pasuk says, "V'ra'acha v'samach b'libo," in last week's Parsha. When Moshe is appointed, what happens? How does Aaron react? He's happy. He's joyous for his brother. How could have he reacted? Sibling rivalry. He's my younger brother. What are you doing skipping over me? He only survived because I put him in the basket in the river. And now you're going to skip over me? I'm holier. I'm a better orator. I'm older. But Aaron doesn't say, and he doesn't even think any of that. You know what he says? He sees, v'samach b'libo. He's so happy in his heart. Not only what he demonstrates and says the right things, even in his heart, he thought and felt the right way. Say Chazal, what did Aaron get? Because he felt, what was he rewarded with? The Urim, the Tumim that sit on the heart and that have the stones of all the Shvatim that light up, because Aaron could keep them all in his heart, because he kept in his brother in his heart, because he was joyous. V'racha v'samach b'libo. And then later the pasuk says, "Hine matov v'manayim shavas lachem gam yachad." Pasuk in Tehillim, and the Medrash says, "Kashem atov asher arosh yered al zakam zkan Aaron yered al pi midosav." When Aaron was being anointed with oil, and the oil was overflowing, the pasuk says, "Zakan Aaron." The word zakan twice. The Medrash says, why is the word zakan, beard, being used twice? Because when the oil was being anointed on Aaron to designate him as the high priest, who felt the joy, the happiness, who felt as if he himself was being anointed with his brother? None other than, now Moshe wanted to be the high priest. Moshe wanted that position of distinction. And yet, he wasn't jealous. There was no rivalry. He felt the joy of his brother. Moshe was happy for Aaron. Aaron was happy for Moshe. That is the idea of being shkulin ke'echad. The capacity to fargin, to be happy for somebody else. There's nothing greater or better in the world than to be happy and to be joyous for the people around you, to fargin. In other languages, there's a word for being happy because someone else is failing. Schadenfreude is a German word which means to take joy and pleasure in the failure of another. How do you say that in Hebrew? There is no word, because we would never take pleasure or happiness in the failure of another. Fargin, we're happy. To be invited to your friend's simcha, you don't say, why aren't I making a simcha? Happy your friend's putting an addition on their house. We don't say, why aren't I putting an addition? The author of Kelma, shared with you before, says, to be nosei ba'olam chaveira, we know, one of the 48 ways Torah is acquired is that principle of nosei ba'ol, to be able to feel empathy, to feel the pain of another. Feel the pain of another. Says the author of Kelm, which is harder, to feel the pain of another or to feel the joy and pleasure of another? Says the author, when it comes to someone else's pain, you say to yourself, I'll make them a meal, I'll drive them to the doctor, I'll take over their carpool because I'm just so happy it's not me. They're going through some suffering, a terrible time. I'll step up and I'll genuinely empathize and feel their pain because I'm so happy at least it's not me. But when someone else is making a simcha, when someone else has success, when someone else was designated for some great task, to be happy for them, you say, why isn't it me? So it's much harder to be happy for them. But nevertheless, that's a midah. Hu Aaron Moshe. Sometimes Moshe Aaron, sometimes Aaron Moshe. Shkulun ke'echad. What made them equal? You know why they were equal? Because they took joy and pleasure. They didn't only feel the pain of one another, they were happy for one another. I forgot her name, and I apologize, but one of the parenting experts wrote a book on parenting, and she says, the most critical, the most important, and the biggest challenge in our generation to instill within our children is this ability to be happy for one another. Children are growing up in a generation where it's easy to see their friend, they got the new Nintendo, they got the latest version of the iPhone, they got into that school or seminary or yeshiva, they got the shidduch before them. It's so easy for a child to not be able to fargin because they want, and they feel they're entitled, they deserve. But from a very young age, to teach children the joy and the happiness of being joyful for another person. Take from your birthday presents, and every year on your birthday, among your birthday presents, take one and give it to someone else. One night of Hanukkah, the way we're going to celebrate Hanukkah, we're going to give you something to give someone else. The capacity to fargin someone else, v'racha v'samach b'libo, to be happy, to instill already from a very young age. So as you get older, someone else got a promotion at work, not you, I'm able to be happy for them. I could dance at their wedding, even though it comes before mine, I'm still single. I could go to the bris, even though I'm still waiting and longing for children. The ability to fargin is the display of greatness. It's what Moshe and Aaron had. They were shkulin ke'echad, and it's critically important to instill within our children. Let's do one more. Last year I only finished half, and I said next year's whole shiur is prepared. And then I prepared a new first half, and the same second half from last year is still waiting that I didn't get to this year. So next year, Bli Neder will start with the end of the Parsha. Let's start with. Let's do one more Rabbi Soloveitchik. Until you give me 2 hours. Maybe we should make it a 2-hour Parsha shiur. Okay, relax. It was a joke. Relax. The moan, the groan, kotze ruach, avodah kasha. Wow. Okay, never mind. Perek Ches Pasuk Tes Zayin. Skip all the way to Perek Ches, chapter 8, verse 17. Tes Zayin, 16. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe Ashkem b'boker v'satzei l'fnei Paro neyotzei hamayma. Wake up in the morning and go stand opposite Paro. Go to the river. Ve'amarti lav kol Hashem shalach ani ve'yavduni. Send out my people so that they may serve me. Again, not bring them home, but let them go. Send them out. Wake up, arise early. Says Rabbi Soloveitchik. Whenever Moshe addressed himself to Paro the king, Paro the emperor, the public figure who represented the nation, he met him on the shores of the Nile River. Why? Because in ancient Mitzrayim throughout the ages and still today, the Nile is the symbol of Egyptian might and power and prosperity, the pride and fortress of Egypt. Hashem told Moshe, get up in the morning and address yourself to the proud, self-confident, power-oriented, authority-conscious Paro, whose word is law for millions of people. You must meet him at the bank of the river. To depersonalize Paro the king, don't address him with pleas, but with a warning, an ultimatum. To the proud Paro, address not a petition, but a demand. Tell him that he has violated the inalienable rights of the people. Stop him, block him, place yourself in front of him, confront him, courageously protest the crimes of Egypt. Tell him that the Nile River, the focus of the pride of the Egyptian people, may turn into a monstrosity. The water may turn into blood, and the fish will die. He should not be too self-righteous and overconfident. He should know what's about to happen. Again, see the pride, the power. Paro was being tormented by having to keep up this image. Call him out on it. The emperor is naked. Call him out on it. Meet him there. Speak truth to power. Have the courage to stand up. Don't apologize. Don't allow ourselves. Don't call it a deal. We're being extorted. It's a crime, not only against the Jewish people, it's a crime against humanity. And we hear Besoros Tovos Yeshuas and Nechamas. Please remain to say all of Sefer Tehillim as we continue to daven for our people.